So with New You Financial, we've been in business for 8 years with our funding partners, providing credit repair funding services and so on and so forth. So if we kind of go through here, one of the services that we offer is credit restoration. And essentially our process is what we're trying to do is get our customers or our clients up to a 720 to 720 plus credit score. And then ultimately, and again, a lot of credit restoration, credit repair companies, their objective is just to get you a good credit score. What our objective is to continue working with you and provide products and services to teach you, once you're up there, how you can now leverage that into generating passive income for yourself, keeping it up there, and ultimately earning yourself some money. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going through that complete process with an example of how that works. So from a credit restoration process, what we're doing is we offer this to individuals and businesses with a credit score below 720. And our objective is get you to a 720 plus credit score. From there, what we're looking to do is get you funding through our funding program where you start to earn passive income. Now, you have three options with our credit score program, and ultimately it starts with a credit assessment. So what you do is it's a free, no obligation credit assessment, so we can tell where you are in your current situation, because everybody's situation is different. So the first step that we always want people to do is come in for a free, no obligation assessment, at which point we put together a plan for you, let you know what your options are, and guide you from there. So from a generic perspective, from credit repair, you have three options. Option number one is where we teach you how to repair your credit, and you can do it yourself. That is your done-for-you service. There's no cost for that, but takes roughly 6 to 12 months. If you ever tried to repair your own credit, it can take you that long to do it, to understand, so on and so forth. We also have credit coaches or credit experts that can actually perform the service for you. Now, the cost for doing that is roughly $2,500. You would pay for our services $2,500, and it would pay, and our team would go through the process, and we would explain that process right up front as part of that free assessment and what we were going to do that. And then the third part is you can participate in our Pay It Forward program. And this is where I'm going to talk about our Pay It Forward program. With our Pay It Forward program, we have what we call credit partners or funding partners who will pay for your credit repair. Once your credit is repaired and you receive funding, again, this is where we get you into our funding program, where you become part of our Pay It Forward program. Once you receive funding, you pay back the credit repair costs plus interest, and there's essentially no out-of-pocket money for you or from you. So what's happening is one of our credit partners is paying to get your credit repaired, and once you get to 720, you become one of our funding partners as well. And now you get to help other people. That's where we get the Pay It Forward program. Now, once you've done that, you're in a position to help other people get their credit repaired by becoming a credit partner in our Pay It Forward program. And as when I get into the example, you'll see exactly how that works. Okay. So once your credit is restored, we can then get you into our funding program. And ultimately, that's where you want to be, because that's where you're going to start to generate passive income. You're going to start earning income for yourself. And you're going to be able to help other people. So we'll get into a little bit more details there. So our personal and our corporate funding is available to members with a credit score of 720 plus. So if you are already have a good credit score, if you're sitting at 740, 800, we can get maximum funding at the best rates. Okay. Now, from a personal and existing corporation who has a credit score above 720, we can obtain as much as $150,000 in funding, allowing you to become a funding or credit partner. So if you're not at 720, your first step is to get up there. If you're already there, then you're now in a position to become one of our funding partners and credit partners and help other people get their credit repaired. So from there, you can obtain $150,000 funding, allowing you to become a funding or credit partner. Additionally, we have a corporate strategy, which again, we're going to piece these all together when I put the program together to show you how powerful this is. So whether you have a, below 720 or above 720, this is all going to work for you and make sense. So we have what we have. We've just launched our corporate funding strategy where you can create a new company for yourself or a new corporation, new business, where we can obtain funding for that business. Now, when we get into our corporate strategy, why would you want a business? Well, part of it is limiting your liability. You can generate and receive funding for a corporation and build that corporation, or we help you do that. And you limit your personal liability. So again, once we get into the example, that will make sense. So we have two options from a corporate side, and this only applies to a new corporation. So if you don't have an existing corporation, for people who have an existing corporation, again, we can repair your credit and obtain funding up here. So first step is for $5,000, you get a corporation, and we obtain $50,000 worth of funding. Ultimately, we have a package for $10,000. We create a corporation where we then obtain between $350,000 and $500,000 in funding. Now, before you look at these and start saying, "Oh my God, I don't have $5,000 or $10,000," this will all fit together, because we can create, and we're going to show you again at no cost to you, create these corporations on your behalf, and you can obtain these fundings. Okay, and so we're going to show you that in the example. Now, some people who have this, again, once you see the power of this, some people will actually, if they have the $10,000, they will invest it, but you don't need to have this to take advantage of this strategy. And we will show you how to do that. So the process takes roughly 4 months to create this corporation and get their credits, the corporation's credit score to a level where we can obtain this funding. So you're looking at roughly 4 months. Okay. So from here, the funding that we obtain here, we use that in multiple passive income strategies, which we are currently turning, or what we mean doubling, the investment within 90 to 180 days. Okay, so keep that in mind as we go through our example, that we are able to double the money that we are getting for funding and turning that within 90 and 180 days. Okay, so what I'm going to try to do here, is to be as transparent as possible. And again, any questions that you have, we're going to answer them right at the end. Okay. So Greg, I just want to check in with you to make sure that you can still hear me. You can still see my screen. Are we still good? I just want to kind of do a quick check for you.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we're good?
Yep.
All right. Perfect. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lead this into, so essentially, what we're doing is we're starting with credit restoration, credit repair, working to get you into funding, and then ultimately creating a passive income opportunity for you so that you're generating income and revenue for yourselves while you're maintaining and protecting your credit score. Okay. And we're doing that through personal and corporate funding. So what we're going to do is we're going to take an example scenario where we have Bob, and we're going to look at the Pay It Forward credit repair. So we're going to look at Bob, who currently has a credit score of 540. So what we're going to do is, currently on average right now, we are repairing credit within 35 days. Okay. And so in this case, we are looking to restore Bob's credit in roughly 35 days, but the cost will be roughly $2,500. So Bob doesn't have the money, but he is interested in our Pay It Forward program. Now, John is a funding partner, and he agrees to pay Bob's credit. Okay, so he's agreed to pay the $2,500 to get Bob's credit from 540 to 720. Now, Bob agrees to get his credit repaired, have John pay for it, and agrees to get funding once his credit has been repaired. In exchange, Bob agrees to pay John $5,000 once he gets his funding. Okay, so right now there's no money coming out of Bob's pocket, and he is now in the credit repair process, and he agrees that once we get him up to the 720, he is going to go into our funding program. He's going to become one of our funders and help other people. So if we go down here, so within, say, 35 days, Bob's credit is repaired. We then will take roughly another 21 to 30 days to get Bob funding. So Bob's credit is restored to 720 and is now eligible for up to $150,000 in funding. Now, this can vary based on a number of situations, but in this example, we're going to use $150,000. And again, when you get your assessment, all of this will be laid out for you as to the direction you want to go. Okay, so here's an example of how this 150 would be dispersed. Now, 45 of this is actually going to consulting fees. We recommend that everybody hold back $30,000 of that money in order to service the debt for 6 months, because we know that within 6 months, the remaining part of that, we can turn it and start giving you enough money to pay and service the debt moving forward. And you'll see the example as we move forward. Now, 5,000 of that you are paying to John, because John helped Bob fix his credit. So 5,000 is going to pay John for helping Bob get to this point. That leaves $70,000 for Bob to now invest. So we now have $70,000 to invest. So what are we going to do with that $70,000? So let's look back at the corporate stacking strategy that we talked to, or the corporate strategy. We're going to take $10,000 of that and start to create a new corporation. So stay with me here because it may get a little bit complicated. Okay, so $10,000 we're going to take out of that $70,000, and we are going to initiate a new corporation so that that corporation can obtain $350,000 in funding. Now remember, this takes 4 months. Okay, so we've invested $10,000. We're going to get that corporation created, and we're going to look to obtain $350,000 in funding. Now it can go as high as $500,000, but we're going to play with the $350,000, and we're going to show you our corporate stacking strategy. The remaining $60,000 we're going to invest in our Pay It Forward program. So just as John, who was one of our funding, helped Bob, now Bob's in a position to help other people do the same thing and repair their credit. Okay, so 60,000 of that he will put into the Pay It Forward, help other people restore their credit. In exchange, he is going to double his money every 90 to 180 days, helping others repair their credit. At the same time, we're going to start to pay down that personal debt. Okay, so if we continue through the process, we're going to break it down a little bit more. We're going to summarize this. So Bob received personal funding on month 1, once his credit is repaired and he's received his funding, he's received $70,000 in month 1. Okay, we're going to look at basically see what happens in the first year. $10,000 is used to create the first business or corporation number 1. $60,000 is put into the Pay It Forward. Fast forward to month number 4. Remember, we said that we can take the $60,000, and what we're going to do is we're going to double that over. In this case, we're doubling it in 4 months. So that $60,000 turns into $120,000 from the Pay It Forward program. So in month 4, our first corporation now receives funding of $350,000. What we're doing in this scenario is, because we took $10,000 and created that corporation, we are not now going to take $25,000 back from that corporation in exchange for that $10,000 that we loaned that business to to be created. So we've turned that $10,000 into $25,000. And again, this can be any number, but here you're getting 2.5 times for creating that corporation that you own. And I'll show you again when we look at the company in more detail. So to make it simple, we now have $120,000 in month one, plus the $25,000 we received from the corporation. So that gives us $145,000, which is reinvested into Pay It Forward, helping other people get their credit repaired. Again, in 4 months from now, in month 8, that 145 we are able to turn into $290,000 from the Pay It Forward program, which we then reinvest back into the Pay It Forward program. By month 12, we have now turned that 290 into 580 from the Pay It Forward program. We're going to assume that we have, again, not paid down the loan. Again, in this case, you would have, but we're just going to assume, for argument's sake, we still owe that initial $150,000 we received on month 1. Okay? So our net worth, what we have in net value of money that we have working for us, is $430,000. How do I get that? Well, I take the $580,000 that we've generated over the year for the Pay It Forward program, deduct $150,000 that we have in loans, and that leaves us with $430,000 net worth. Okay. From here, again, you can either reinvest that as we continue to move forward. You can use this to pay down the loan, so you're actually sitting with $140,000 with no debt. Again, not necessarily something we would agree with or offer you, but again, it's completely your choice as to what you want to do with this. But ultimately, what you want to do is have this to continue to grow. Okay. Now, this is just your personal side. Now, remember, when we first started this process in month 1, we also started our own business or our own corporation. So let's look at what happens with that corporation. In month 1, we initiated the creation of business number 1. It cost $10,000, which was received from your personal funding or Bob's personal funding. In month 4, we received $350,000 in funding. From that, we have $170,000 available to invest. So where does that $175,000 go? Okay, that $175,000 is $10,000. What we're going to do is start to create a second business, because we're going to do this process over again, which means in 4 months, we're going to obtain another $350,000. So we'll start off with $10,000 to initiate that creation. We're going to take $25,000 and we're going to pay it back to you or to Bob as payment for them loaning the $10,000 to create this business to start with. That's where we get that $25,000 in here. This is that $25,000 here. Okay. That will leave us with, hang on here, wrong slide. That will leave us with $150,000 that we can now invest through the corporation, separate from your personal funding, into the Pay It Forward program to help even more people. In month 8, we have now turned that $150,000 into $300,000 in the Pay It Forward program. Our second business now receives funding, at which point, because this business loaned them the $10,000 to create it up here, we're going to get $25,000 back. Okay, that gives business number 1 or corporation number 1 an additional $25,000 that we can now invest in the Pay It Forward program, which again gives us $325,000 available to reinvest in the Pay It Forward program. By month 12, we've doubled this through the Pay It Forward program to $650,000. If we assume that we have not paid any principal off that $350,000, then our net worth from our corporation is now $300,000 after 1 year. That's $650,000 less the $350,000 loan. That leaves us a net worth or net profit of $300,000 from this corporation. And again, the same thing's going to happen for business number 2, number 3, and so on, and as many times as you wish to do this. Okay, remembering what happens in this corporation, again, you are not personally liable for, but you're building up an asset. Every business that you're building up following the same strategy, you're building up an asset that ultimately you own 100% of. So you own 100% of business one, business two, business three. Okay, so let's summarize that. If we look at the plan, by following our plan, after 1 year, Bob's credit score went from 540 to 720,000. Bob then obtained funding for $150,000. Okay. At the end of year one, from that $150,000, he has a personal net worth of $430,000. He owns two businesses currently with a net worth of $300,000 and growing. And we're in the process of creating his third business. That's almost $750,000 in net worth in 1 year with no out-of-pocket expense to Bob. Bob never paid a dime other than getting other people to help and using other people's money to generate this type of revenue. By the end of year two, and I did not take that 1 year further, but Bob's net worth will be well over $2 million based on following this strategy and ultimately helping other people to do what you were helped or what Bob was helped to do. And so, again, if your credit score is below 720, you're going to require this step, and it's going to take a little bit longer. But if you're already above that, you can start right at this point and follow the same strategy. Again, ultimately, there's no money coming out of your pocket in order to achieve these types of results. Now, again, this is a hypothetical situation, but very real. And so from this perspective, you follow our plan, and this is the potential that can happen. Now, these numbers are based on reinvesting. Doesn't necessarily mean that, again, if you have personal net worth of $430,000, if you needed to take $100,000 out and now you're making $100,000 a year, well, you still have $330,000 to reinvest into year two. So your year two would obviously be less, but at the same time, you're also generating businesses that are generating the same type of revenue scenario. And again, you can continue to do this over and over and over. There's no limit as to the number of businesses you can create and to the number of people that you can help. So I know that there's probably a ton of questions. I know that there may be some confusion, which I'm more than happy to help out. At this point, I would like to again, open it up to Greg if he wants to ask the questions. I do want to say that, again, our process here is it all starts with an assessment. And from, again, once you get into the system, everybody's situation is different. And so with every person that we do the free assessment with, we create the plan and present it as to what's going to fit you. So this being a little bit more generic, and it's going to be a little bit different based on your situation. So once you have that process or the assessment done, we can then assist you and provide you with the plan and your options on how to get through the system and draft a plan similar to this, but changing Bob's name to your name. There's so many people that have below average credit that that's what we're bringing people into the program. That's what is ingrained in our head, is that you have to have a good credit. And yeah, when you have good credit, you can get maximum financing, you can get maximum funding, you get the best rates, right? But the thing is that people are so focused on just their credit score. Your credit score is only as good as how you use it. And again, what we're trying to teach you, and when we put the plan together, we're teaching the whole process, right? We're teaching how to take your credit and use it to give you guys a better life, to give you to use it in the proper way, to use it as good debt versus bad debt. If you've ever read Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant, right? You have your good debt and you have your bad debt. And so it's your bad debt that has got your credit score to where it is. So let's improve it as part of our plan, as part of our teaching. And it's something that, we don't, with a lot of companies, they repair your credit score and then you're off to do your own thing. What happens with most people is they go out and say, all right, I got great credit. I'm going to go borrow this and I'm going to take trips and I'm going to buy cars and I'm going to go buy new appliances. And all of a sudden you're back into the same situation, right? But let's take that debt and let's get that debt working for you, as we showed you in this sample plan here, how we can take that and start leveraging the funding that you can get from your credit score and turning that money into revenue producing, income producing opportunities, and turning that money so that, again, you can take a portion of that and pay yourself, but now you have your credit and your money working for you. And now you can afford, you're not spending money, other people's money, on things you need to live, right? You're actually getting paid and you don't need to use credit to buy stuff, right? You have the money to buy the stuff that you want. So it's part education, it's part taking that credit and making it work for you. And repairing your credit is just the first step. It doesn't stop at that point. Does that make sense? Let's say, for instance, you have an 800 credit score. Okay, well, first of all, again, looking at my screen here, you bypass this. Okay, so you come into our system. Again, you come in for the free assessment and we determine, hey, you got an 800 credit score. We can obtain $150,000 funding. Okay, hypothetically, we say, okay, we can get you $150,000 in funding, and it's going to cost you to service that 7%. Okay, so what if we were, again, what we're doing right now is we're getting more than this, but what if you could take that money and earn 14% annually, and you're paying 7%? How much would you borrow? If you're making 14% but only paying 7%, on $150,000, you're making double that, right? So you would be making like $15,000, close to what, $12,000 to $13,000 a year passively without doing anything, only because you borrowed at one interest rate and you sold it for another, right? Or you loaned it out for another. Well, with our program, we're actually able to double this between 90 and 120 days, right? So if you can take this, and I've already showed you the example above, if you're taking and funding for $150,000 and you can turn that in a year to actually making net profiting out of that with no money out of your pocket, of what did I have up here? What is this personally? Hang on a sec here. $430,000 by borrowing $150,000 that's already being serviced, right? Why wouldn't you do that and use your credit score to do that?
Especially considering every time you flip that money, you held back 6 months of payment. So that you're paying the loan off without paying it off, because it never took a nickel out of your pocket, nor did it, which is the biggest point, is passively being paid for. In other words, not one drop of sweat from your brow was necessary, not one calorie of energy used to pay that debt. That's the big point. That's the key point.
And that's the thing, is that you have a 740 credit score, you start right here, you get your funding, right? At the end of the year, you have an excess of $430,000 just by having a good credit score. Without any money out of your pocket, you have an excess amount. If you don't like the $150,000 debt, you pay that off. You're sitting with $430,000 in your bank account. Or we recommend that you take this and reinvest it. Why wouldn't you reinvest it, right? Why wouldn't you? Again, you could take out $100,000. You're now making $100,000 a year, but your net worth is still increasing, because you can still take 330 of that and go into 12 into the second year and start doubling it every 4 months, right? You have it free and clear. It continues to grow. As long as you're following that strategy, as long as you're not taking that 150,000 and putting it into bad debt, into stuff that's not going to make you money, right? You can see here, if you can go that 1 year, you could be making, you take 100,000, you just made yourself $100,000 for the whole year that you can go and spend on the stuff that you want to spend it on. Go on a vacation, do whatever you want, but you still have money left over to continue to make money so that next year you can take out another $100,000 and still continue to grow that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think the person who asked me that question, now that I think back on it, I think their concern was, because I kind of gave them this whole story earlier.
Right.
They're going to watch it now in more detail, but I think their question was, well, do I have to wait a year before I can pay myself? And I said, well, no, you can do whatever you want to do. If you want to make $100,000 starting the first month you get your money, all you have to do is every 3 months pay yourself 30 grand.
Yeah, it just gives you less money.
Yeah.
It gives you less money to double, right?
Right. That's all it does.
Less money to invest, right? So as much as, again, even if we look at the 4 months, remember how I broke this down? So we had the 60,000. We now have 120,000. We have 25,000 from the first corporation that we created. So we have $145,000 in cash. You can do with whatever you want with that, theoretically, right? I've just used this example to say, okay, let's let it ride, right? Let's reinvest the whole thing. But what if you wanted to take out 30,000? That still leaves you $115,000, right, to reinvest in the Pay It Forward program. So if we change those numbers slightly, you get 30,000 here. We have 115 that we can then turn into 225, right? So we have 225. You take out 25 or 30, you're left with 200,000, right? That 200,000 at the end of the year is now worth 400,000. You're still sitting at 400,000 minus 150. You're still increasing your net worth every single month, and you're pulling out $30,000 a month. Right? It just gives you less money to reinvest. The first part is to get the credit, get your credit restored if it needs to be. But ultimately, your goal is to get into funding. So as a couple, you could do this double if you want to. Do it as individuals or do it together.
Yep. Well, I don't have any more questions. Do you show any questions in the?
I do. There is a couple in here that I will address. One of the other things too is that, again, one of the things that we try to teach everybody is that your ultimate goal is to start to create a business or a corporation and have it run through that corporation. Again, that limits any kind of liability, and ultimately you're going to get, better tax breaks. Again, I'm not a tax accountant or a lawyer that you would go through for a tax accountant, but we all know that businesses have, you can write off stuff, reduce your income. Ultimately, that's what you want to do. It becomes, anybody that gets into becoming an entrepreneur and starting a business, they're trying to reduce their taxes ultimately. So your ultimate goal should be to start to create these corporations, right? And that's how we built it into the stacking. And again, one of the things here is that this is your net worth from your personal funding, but you've also started a corporation which is generating additional money for you, right? You're creating additional businesses. And again, some people think, well, I've never heard of this before. Well, this is what the wealthy people are doing, right? They know what they need to do to get this done. And if you look at people like Robert Kiyosaki, and you look at what he teaches, you look at Donald Trump, everything is in through his corporations, right? It's how business is structured. It happens every single day. It's completely legal. There's nothing illegal about it. You're just building assets. You're building businesses. You're taking funding. You're taking other people's money and you're utilizing it to make money for yourself. So again, it's about having the right plan, having the right strategy, implementing that strategy, and making it work for you instead of against you. Does that make sense? And again, you guys can this will be something for you guys to think about as you jump off this webinar. Now, I tried to make this whole thing as simple as possible by saying, once we get our first funding, we'll take $60,000, put it in to pay it forward, and then we'll get our $10,000 and put it into our first corporation. But there's nothing that says that you can't say, okay, well, why don't I just take $40,000 and put it in to pay it forward, and take $30,000 and create 3 businesses? There's some food for thought for you. So now at the end of the year, you have 3 businesses making $300,000.
That's close to $1 million in 1 year.
If you decide to go that route. Whatever your comfort level is, those are the options that you have. Once you've got your funding, you can decide which way you go. You're not stuck to this. Okay? And that kind of leads into one of the questions here that we got from Lewis here. I'm assuming that if we get our credit to 720 and proceed with full funding and grow business as you outline, that you will guide us through every step. And absolutely. We would go through that whole process. Again, we would be investing that money for you as long as you give us permission to do so. And so what would happen is that we would then take that money, and what we do from a credit repair perspective is when somebody says, okay, I want your credit partners to pay it forward, I want to be part of your pay it forward program, we run and manage that whole process for you. So what we do is when somebody goes into that program, they get queued up, and you as a funding partner, we would do it on your behalf. We would get their whole process done, and then we would basically run this for you. We would manage this for you. Okay, does that make sense? He says, awesome, that's good. Okay. Why is the credit marker 720? This is from Emmanuel. Why is the credit marker 720? What's the difference between 700 and 720? Basically, those are the numbers that lenders look at, right? And most lenders, again, they've set their benchmark about 720 to 740, where they feel comfortable loaning. They know that you're a good credit risk. And so that's why a lot of lenders, when they get into the 720, 740 mark, when you're above that, they know that your credit history is good. They feel comfortable loaning you money based on something that's below. So this is something that has been set by banks and lenders as to what they feel is a good credit risk versus a not so good credit risk. Does that make sense? And if there is nothing else, all I want to say is that if you haven't already done so, you can make sure that you get at least in the system to start your credit assessment. From the credit assessment, there's 4 pieces of documentation, and one of our people will reach out to you to let you know. The quicker you get the documents in there, the quicker you will get the assessment done, and the quicker you will get into this process, right? It's like anything. Every day you waste is a day that you're going to lose money. So you get in there, bring your credit score as is. I know we deal with a lot of people saying, well, I know you guys can't help me, right? It's always that adage, but you'll never know unless you take that first step, and you have absolutely nothing to lose. So make sure that, don't start second guessing. Let the system come back and let you know what your options. Everybody has options, and we'll put those options together for you. But don't discount that it won't work for you. Take us up on our free assessment. Get your free assessment in there as quick, as soon as you can. Get your documents uploaded. And on that note, that's all I have to say.
Hey, George, thank you very much. Again, I know you're a very busy man. We hit right at an hour, just a minute over. So I just want to say right now, there's 5 steps, guys. Join the club. Bring your credit as is. Get funded for your maximum amount. Choose your cash flow vehicle, which we